Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining in. Great, thank you for that. Thank you all for being here today. We're broadcasting live from a variety of places, most of which I don't know. All I know is I'm in Florida. I want to thank my good friend and fellow Greek, Jerry Efthanidis, for introducing me to this opportunity and now being able to share it with you. I think you're going to find not only today's information interesting and investable, but also is in the crosshairs of a lot of things that are going on right now as it relates to food chain, the supply chain for food, and also taking care of our planet. One of the things that I mentioned to Jerry when he introduced this to me was he was aware of my keen interest in ocean conservation and my work in that area. And it pales in comparison to what my friends at OSearch are doing and what's going on with Earth First Food Ventures. But it's right in the sweet spot of what interests me. So I hope you find it interesting as well. We are recording this for the record. So if you miss it, part of it, or you have friends that want to and will benefit from knowing about it, please be sure to look at it. Look for it on the Family Office Insights YouTube channel, and you can fast forward through things if you've already seen them and so forth, and share it with who you, with anybody that might benefit. A little Zoom housekeeping here. As you all know, we can't see or hear you, but you are welcome to chat in the chat box of the Q&A. We encourage you to do so. We have a lot of people on the call today, but we'll get to as many questions as possible. And I would ask that you just send them in as you think of them, and we'll get to them as soon as possible and answer them throughout. So thank you for that video, by the way. That was I didn't know that that was going to happen, and it's certainly catalyzes some thinking and demonstrates that we got issues to resolve. So with that, I'm going to hand it to Brian, and please welcome everybody and thank you for being with us today.
Thank you, Arthur. Very much appreciate the intro. Thank you, everyone, for joining and attending. I'm dialing in from beautiful, sunny Geneva, Switzerland today. and I know my colleagues are around the globe in different areas as well. I am the co-founder and CEO of Earth First Food Ventures. And as our name implies, we're focused on channeling capital into innovative food technologies, plant-based assets, cellular agriculture, and fermentation, what we call collectively alternative proteins, for a healthier planet, healthier consumer, and what we like to define as profit with purpose. Thank you, Elliot. I'm sure many of you have seen Sir David Attenborough's recent film on Netflix, A Life on Our Planet. Sir David Attenborough, for almost a century, I believe he's 90 something. He's an icon in the industry. He's been broadcasting and reporting about the Earth and the planet and its natural history for the BBC for decades. His film, A Life on Our Planet, is quite alarming. If you haven't seen it, I would encourage you to do so. It's a wake-up call to, I guess, humanity's destruction of the planet. The beauty of the movie, in my opinion, is at the end, he does leave us with hope, to be able to turn this clock back on carbon emissions, food supply chain, dying oceans, and he leaves us with a few solutions that we need to address today. And one of them is our broken food supply chain and the need to shift towards a plant-centric diet for the greater population. The world's growing. We all know this. I don't need to throw out numbers that you see in the newspaper every day. We're sitting at close to 8 billion. We're headed towards 10 billion by 2050 and more than 11 billion by 2100. That's a massive planet with lots of people to feed. If we continue to do it in the way we're doing it today, which is a meat-centric society and food supply chain, we're going to run out of oxygen on the planet. And I think this is Sir David Attenborough's message. We are a meat-centric society for those wealthy countries that can afford it. And if cattle were actually a nation, it would be, after China and the US, ranked number 3 for global greenhouse gas emissions. This is not sustainable. It's not sustainable in the current population. It's certainly not sustainable with another 3 billion people on the planet. We need to find solutions, which is what EFFV is focused on. EFFV is an ESG and impact investing firm. We focus on cleaner environment, bluer oceans, a better planet, and healthier consumers by bringing food innovation, plant-based assets, cellular agriculture, and fermentation to growth and scale. Again, profit with purpose. The alternative protein space is brand new. By brand new, call it 10 years. I believe Beyond Meat was founded in 2009, so that's 11 years. The percentage of market share of alternative proteins represents just 2% of global consumer demand today. That's still, it's a massive number when you look at the 20 billion in spend, but it's tiny in comparison to animal protein. But the good news is, and this comes from a recent study by Boston Consulting Group and our good friends out in Zurich, Blue Horizon Ventures, the prediction of the growth of alternative proteins over the next 15 years to 2035 is a projected 11% market share. That's a staggering $290 billion market. And this is being driven by 2 elements. Consumers, which are demanding cleaner, healthier, lower carbon footprint, environmentally friendly end protein. It all starts with the consumer, it all ends with the consumer. And the second variable is very important, is technology. The technology exists today to provide different alternative proteins, maybe not to scale at the moment, but it's coming. 10 years ago, we didn't have a plant-based burger. Everybody thought Ethan Brown was crazy, founder of Beyond Meat. Well, he's not so crazy today anymore, looking forward on the business he's built and a lot of the follow-ons that are out there. The good news is the 11% projection out to 2035 is a base case. The blue sky projections from Boston Consulting and Blue Horizons are even more exciting. The study predicts that the industry, total alternative proteins, could reach a 16% market share if the industry is able to reach parity. And they define parity by taste, texture, and price. That is, alternative proteins have a similar taste to either meat or chicken. The texture is similar, and the price is affordable and comparable. Right now, prices of course, plant-based burgers, plant-based sausages, the price is substantially higher than traditional meat, right? So when the industry reaches parity, there's a probability that the market share, and these are million metric tons, could reach 16%. And the blue sky scenario number 2, projections are that the industry could reach 22% of total alternative protein in the overall global protein market with government regulation. And by government regulation, they mean government stepping in to support the industry, grow the industry, subsidize it, and or tax the alternative, either the meat industry or the dairy industry, for as a means to support a nascent industry and grow it from current 2% of market share to what would be a whopping double blue sky of 22% market share. Whether it's 11, 16, or 22% is yet to be seen, but the base case of 11% is not insignificant. The industry, of course, has already proven that it's here to stay. Beyond Meat's a 10-year-old company, $10 billion market cap. I think we're all kind of sitting there scratching our heads when the company went public. Must have been, what now, 3 years now, at a $1 billion valuation, 50 million in revenue. Today, the company is a $10 billion market cap with the same multiple of 20 times revenue, right? No EBITDA, none of these companies have EBITDA yet. Because they've grown their revenue from 50 million to almost 600 million. So the valuation has accompanied the metrics along with the sales multiples. The industry is trading as a growth industry, which it clearly is. And so the multiples are stretched. They're in eye-popping valuations, no different than any other growth industry that we've seen in the past, whether it was renewables or electric vehicles or internet and technology. The food industry is witnessing something very similar. There's nothing under 8 times sales in the industry at the moment. And I think you go as high as 27 times sales, because these companies are innovating. They're on high double-digit growth targets, and they're reinventing our food supply chain. Super exciting time to be in the food innovation space. And the public markets are showing it. A lot of money to be had in the industry. There was a recent, another film on Netflix called Seaspiracy, to go back to our dying oceans. This is very important to talk about oceans. Without healthy oceans, we lose our planet. The movie highlights the importance of protecting our oceans and the tremendous damage we as humans are doing to our oceans, whether it be overfishing, reefers, trawlers. I think it's kind of a wake-up call of the actual damage we humans are capable of inflicting, in this case on oceans, in the case of David Attenborough, this movie, on the entire planet. I think it's super important for us as a society to figure out how we fix our broken oceans. Our first asset in alternative food technology was actually, in one of our most exciting assets, it was a partnership with a company called ADF Asset Management, Pure Salmon, out in Singapore, ex-colleagues of mine from Deutsche Bank. That focus was building global scale, utilizing a technology out of Israel called Aquamoth. It's land-based aquaculture. And the technology allows us to grow fish from egg to full harvest outside of urban centers, local production for local consumption without antibiotics, chemicals, or hormones, and without the need to ship from the 2 main incumbent markets around the globe, which are Norway and Chile. It's a very exciting asset, no mercuries, no chemicals, healthier end product produced right next to the end consumer, utilizing new technologies. We've since diversified our business towards plant-based assets, a wholly owned subsidiary called Pomegranate Dublin, Ireland, launching in Q2. It's a B2C around plant-based healthy fare, no brick and mortar, with plant-based dietary menu only. We're involved in minority stakes in a vertical farming company in the UK, with partners in Tempeh and alternative plant-based assets through fermentation and phytonutrients out in California. Plant-based asset industry is here to stay. This is for sure. We're developing partners in cellular agriculture, specifically cellular aquaculture. I'll talk about that at a later stage, and partnerships in fermentation, both in Germany, Singapore, and the US. All of these combined are considered alternative proteins. EFFV is committed to sustainable development goals of the UN, whether it's healthy end consumer product, focusing on feeding the world, certainly climate change, which is number one for us, saving our oceans, healthier planet and life on land, and then of course, local consumption with local production. We tick a lot of the boxes from the UN Sustainable Development Goals, which is our commitment. As a company, I guess our secret sauce is we're a bunch of senior, older guys, gray haired. We've been around the world. We've been around the globe. We've got a Rolodex that is second to none. It stretches across the globe from city to city, and we're executing with those members of our team. We've got a phenomenal advisory board, partly focused on finance, partly focused on food. We've just added 2 new advisory board members from the food industry, one in cellular agriculture, the other in FMCG. And having those strong partners that bring diversification to our growth strategy is important to us. We're partnered with our verticals in fermentation, cell ag, with amazing founders, visionary founders that are proven execution teams, and that have a very robust cap table already in the works, with global players funding them for the change in this archaic food supply chain. And we're working with industry insiders. Our biggest investors in the aquaculture fund and other assets have a global footprint and deep pockets with big track records in the food industry. Combining all of that in a sector that is witnessing a paradigm shift and is in hyper growth, we think is a perfect cocktail for success for our company.
Brian, if it's okay, there's a
sure
that's relevant to this slide. Maybe we can slide it in here. What segment of the sustainable foods are you most excited about, both as a consumer and as an investor?
Ooh, great question. Let me think of it there. Look, whether it's David Attenborough's movie or Seaspiracy, I would imagine everyone here is smart. We understand. Without our oceans, we are in deep trouble. The oceans sequester 93% of the world's carbon is stored in oceans. If we have a dead ocean, we have a dead planet. This is a statement of fact. You don't need to be a scientist to understand what's going on there. So if I would hate to say plant-based is less exciting than fermentation is less exciting, and then that's not fair. They're all very exciting. But if I had to put my finger on it, Arthur, it's anything related to aquaculture. Our land-based aquaculture partners, for example, top-notch. Cellular aquaculture, the ability to produce bluefin tuna or Atlantic salmon or mahi-mahi through cellular aquaculture technologies, this is groundbreaking. This is the holy grail of saving our oceans and feeding the planet. If you throw in plant-based aquaculture, those are 3 separate technologies. They go across all 3 of the left-hand side verticals. So anything that, in my opinion, can help us save our global oceans is front and center. I don't mean to denigrate fermentation or plant-based assets that are focused on plant-based burgers. No, but anything related to our global oceans, I think, should be investors, topical for investors and consumers alike.
So with logic would suggest, and I'm not a scientist, in any stretch, and you'll find out really fast I don't know what I'm talking about most of the time. At scale, if we're producing tuna and salmon in other than where they normally are produced, at scale, wouldn't that also allow whatever damage to the oceans has happened to recover on some level, assuming we don't continue to, make it hard for the oceans to give it some breathing room, let's say?
Yeah, time to recover. In Arthur, in theory, yes, it does, but it's going to require that fourth box of government intervention and regulation to set the industry and our planet back on track. And that's going to require governments from Beijing to Brussels to Washington to regulate reefers, shipping containers that are going around the globe, trawlers that are depleting our oceans at night without anybody noticing, and I guess the piracy, if you will, as the Seaspiracy alludes to. It's going to require regulation. And as much as the technology improves, it doesn't mean that the bad guys in the industry are going to stop doing what they're currently doing.
Yeah, there'll always be bad guys. Yeah.
Yeah, there'll always be bad guys. Now we need to educate the end consumer as well. The end consumer needs to accept plant-based fish. They need to accept land-based aquaculture, and they need to accept cellular aquaculture as end products. And I had that question all the time. What is the reaction to, how does the end consumer going to react to these alternative products? Well, if they're the only alternative at the moment is mercury-filled microplastic fish from the ocean that's being caught by Chinese trawlers, it's only a matter of education, Arthur, in our opinion.
Sans government intervention, which just sounds daunting, and I'm not saying it couldn't happen, but moving at a snail's pace to get there, is there still hope?
I'm not so sure I agree with the government intervention. I believe there are governments that are super, super progressive. And I call out Singapore and Netherlands, probably the two countries that are most progressive in the food supply chain. For a country the size of Netherlands, it's the world's second largest food exporter. They're doing something right around innovation, technology, with virtually no land or very little land, right? Singapore has no choice but to innovate. They have no land either. Countries like Brazil and the US, where they've got vast expanses, it's probably going to take more time to convince them to break the mold. I remember about a month ago, Singapore announced the approval of Eat Just, a phenomenal company that's doing plant-based eggs and cellular chicken, allowed them to sell their products in Singapore. First country in the world to approve, together with Israel, also a progressive innovation country, Israel and Singapore. There was a study out for Singapore to make that announcement, be the leader in the sale of cellular agriculture products to supermarket shelves and to end consumers. Is all you need is one tipping point, Arthur, and the rest of the world starts lining up. The same day, France said, "No, ce n'est pas possible." Is not going to happen. And this is, we understand this as well. There's a tug of war going on. They need to protect their constituents and their voters, which if you're a dairy farmer and a cattle farmer in France, you really don't want to see cellular beef or plant-based milk on your shelf. Well, that's where you need governments to line up. That's where you really need public policy to support climate efforts, because Brussels is all about climate efforts, right? But then they need to put their action to their words. And Netherlands, there was a report that came out this morning to highlight another country. 70% of the Dutch believe that the meat industry should be taxed and the government should step in and support alternative proteins for climate change and healthier end consumer. That's a big statement. And that's a big number, 70% of your population. You won't get that number in France.
So a friend of mine 2 years ago suggested that if all we did is change to plant-based diet, and of course that's also a daunting task, but it would cause our climate problems and the sequestration of CO2, carbon and all that business, it would be a huge step in the right direction.
Yep. We're in the process of making that happen, Arthur.
Yep. And I wasn't trying to point out the obvious, but it seemed to me at the time that it was a rather bold statement. But since then, it is also proved out that we just need to get away from having all the cows, do what they do on the land.
Yep.
And it become more realistic based on not only what you've said here, but what I've seen in the interim. Is that thinking enough to encourage the youth of our population, even though many of them are thinking about plant-based, including, idiosyncratically my son, for example? Is that getting on that bandwagon something that sentiment-wise has been accepted by the population, the youth especially?
The youth, most definitely. And I look at my company, I look at the average age of our investors. It's under 40. I'm old enough, Arthur, where I'm now banking second generation families around the globe. And a lot of the patriarchs of the family office we work with, they don't get it. They don't understand growing fish on land. They don't get a plant-based patty. They continue to eat their steak. They don't get their children. They get it, and they understand the need to get it, and they understand the need to put capital to work in this new sector, because they're all wearing that ESG hat, which many of their parents, no denigration to them at all. It's a different generation. I look at my kids, they're 27, 24, and a totally different outlook on the way they consume, the way they look at packaging, the way they look at alternative proteins, and the way they live their lives. I think there is a generational gap going on right now, Arthur. And I think that's what's leading to the spectacular rise of alternative proteins, is that new generation. It's must. They're pulling along us older folks.
Yeah. I tried it for a day. Then I had a steak. So pulling along is not working so well for me. So we have a
well, if everybody can do their part in some form or fashion, Arthur, it's better than not doing anything.
Yeah, no, I agree with that completely. Can we jump into a couple other questions here?
Yeah, for sure.
Given your excitement for the aquaculture, how will EFFV find and target the hottest and fastest growing segments of the sustainable foods market?
Yeah, so we're working with industry leaders in the space. We're working with consultants. We're working with our international advisory board, and we're super well connected in the sector. We've got a Rolodex that stretches from Singapore to San Francisco, and it's the only thing we do. We don't get involved in electric cars, even though that's beneficial. We don't get involved in renewable energies, even though that's a hot sector as well. Our sole focus is innovative food technologies. And we've been doing this since 2017. It's a relatively new industry and growing leaps and bounds, but we're right in the thick of it. And so as long as we focus on those assets and companies that have super senior management teams, amazing cap tables already constructed with global players. Look, we need to move the capital of the incumbents. And by the incumbents, I mean the big meat producers in Brazil, the big animal feed producers in the world, the kind of legacy assets, the Kraft Heinz and the Nestle's and the PepsiCos of this world. We need their balance sheets to make and affect this change. You cannot do it without them. It's not us versus them. It's asking them to transition their legacy businesses into new food technologies. And we're part of marrying those two industries.
Great. Can you make a comment about geographically where you see the biggest opportunity over the next decade?
Okay, so in all sectors, there's tremendous opportunity, but the gravitational pull is towards Asia. This is for sure. I think all the studies we're reading out there and all of our R&D and our global partners point to Asia. I think the latest figures we've seen is that over the next 15, 20 years, Asia will be responsible for 2/3 of global protein consumption. And Asia has already started their transition from meat-based to plant-based as well. And I like to highlight China, which is now producing vegetable dumplings, plant-based eggs. They're at the forefront as well. They know they cannot continue to feed their population with pork, cattle, and chicken without innovation, and they know it. So the future for sure is Asia, Arthur.
Very cool. This is actually a very obvious question to be asked. Are the plant-based proteins healthy? I've heard that Beyond Meat is not any more healthier than traditional beef.
Okay, this is a great question. We get this all the time. Some Impossible uses soya. Sometimes it's GMO soya, sometimes it's not. It's processed. They need to put in chemicals there to hold the pea protein and the soy protein together. There have been a lot of naysayers in the industry, particularly from the meat industry, which has created their own lobby in the dairy industry. I like to answer that question a different way, Arthur.
Please do. Yeah.
Could you eat a salad and have it be healthier than a plant-based burger? Yes, because it has no additives, it has nothing to glue it together, it has nothing that is GMO. Yes, there are healthier alternatives to a plant-based bacon strip, healthier alternatives to a plant, but we need to take it one step further, in our opinion. The meat product itself versus a plant-based meat product, there is no contest that the plant-based is healthier. Is it healthier than a salad? No. Is it healthier than just plants, a lentil salad, a chickpea salad? No, for sure not, because it is processed. And you can say what you want about processed foods, but the end product is most definitely healthier than red meat, which has been linked to cancer and cardiovascular disease and heart disease and all kinds of different illnesses, which plants are not. So yes, plant-based burgers do have GMO. Yes, they do have chemical additives that hold it all together. But this is a space of relativeness.
Great.
If that makes sense.
Yep, I think so. Now, if you want to continue on your deck here.
Sure. I don't remember where we left off, but
I think
we did the UN. Yeah.
Yeah. This right here. Right here.
Mm-hmm. Yep, we talked about that. Okay, so our structure is super exciting. Our structure is designed for family offices. We're not a fund. We have no management fee. We have no carry. We have a 1-year lockup for US investors and no lockup for international investors. We're doing a private security offering. We're raising $10 million at a $30 million pre-money valuation direct to the cap table. So investors that come to us are shareholders of our company, not LPs in a fund. That's pretty straightforward. We're diversified. We're diversified by sector with 4 plant-based assets, 2 cell ag and 2 fermentation partners. We are executing this year. We're diversified by geography, 3 in the US, 4 in Europe, 1 in Asia, looking to grow that Asian portfolio as well. As I mentioned, it's a key geography for us going forward. And we allow our investors in our cap table the right to do direct co-investments. We will have 8 opportunities this year. We actually have 1 live right now in a fermented plant-based alternative that we're looking to close at the end of the month for our existing shareholders and investors. And so we think our structure, which is a bit unconventional, we've designed specifically for family offices. And of course, it gives investors the opportunity to access a fast-growing sector that is experiencing and witnessing hypergrowth for what we will continue to believe that over the next 10, 15 years will deliver outsized returns and superior WICs to investors in the space. No different than any hypergrowth industry when it's just taking off.
So this is super helpful. Could you jump back to there we go. We can get into the weeds with somebody who's authentically interested more so, but just to be clear for the group, this is a holding company.
Correct.
Which you have a 30% or let's just say 33 1/3%.
Correct.
Interest in the company if you write a $10 million check.
Yep.
And that the 10 million will be deployed into the companies that you're going to invest in from the cap table, from the company's cash, right?
From the use of proceeds, correct.
Right. And then as you need more money to invest in more companies, how do you expect to handle that?
Well, we're hoping to use the debt markets. We have no debt at the corporate level, Arthur. We're looking to add debt to match our equity after this. We're investigating the issuance of a green bond at the moment. And so, yes, we will be accessing the capital markets in different forms and fashion, probably every year going forward as we scale out the business.
Yeah, totally makes sense. So presently you have deal flow that 10 million will be sufficient.
All spoken for.
Gotcha.
All spoken for. Yeah.
And then, of course, anybody who's interested on this call can look under the hood and see what that deal flow looks like, right?
Correct. Now, the co-investments is an interesting drop down, Arthur, because if one of our partners, which several of them are, issuing a Series B, $100 million in November of this year, and we're given an allocation of 7, I put 1 in from EFFV, we take the other 6 and we allocate it to our investors and family offices
With no
for
friction.
those assets that they fall in love with and want a greater exposure to.
Yeah. With no friction imposed by you.
No, it's
Which is
voluntary.
Yeah, it's
That's at their discretion.
No, I mean, but there's no drag like there are fees as there often is in a co-investment in a fund.
On our co-investments, we do have fees, Arthur. What we don't have fees on are hold companies because we're not a fund. So when you come in to buy equity in my company, you're not paying a management fee or a carrier. You're just a shareholder.
Yeah.
We do charge on the co-investments because we need to pay the rent, Arthur. Right.
Okay.
That's our income stream.
Fair enough. What past experiences has helped the most with EFFV, and in what way? How does this relate to your secret sauce patterns and relationship?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, look, I think we've spent 30 years in the wealth market, and we've got a Rolodex that stretches from Santiago to Amsterdam, and this is so key for us just to see how different generations, and if I go back 30 years, that generation is acting very differently than generation does today. To see that younger generation moving the trust capital or the patriarchs, the second generation capital into ESG and environmentally sound, lower carbon footprint, planet-friendly investments, also focused on return. And this is our motto, profit with purpose. I think is invaluable because it's been a tectonic shift in thinking, and it's being applied today from those generations. Right. The second thing that's been for us really crucial in the growth of the business is, particularly on land-based aquaculture, we really didn't take off on the capital raise for that asset. We ended up closing that fund with 358 million with our partners in Singapore. It took us better part of 3 years as a global team to put that together. 3 sovereign wealth funds, 2 major strategic investors, beautiful asset. But we really didn't take off on that asset until we had the end product coming out of our facilities in Poland to be able to send to our tasting dinners in Istanbul and Athens and Geneva, and because the investors, at the end of the day, they wanted to try the end product first. Remember when Ethan Brown set up Beyond Meat, everybody looked at him like he had 4 eyes. You can't make a plant-based burger. They thought it was crazy. Right, that was $10 billion ago. Well, not only did he make it, it was totally consumer accepted and gets better and better every year. Right, and so I think the skepticism in the industry is quickly fading. We have a cellular agriculture specialist on our board today, and there's tons of skepticism in that sector. Can they build it fast enough? Do they have enough scale? It's super expensive. The bioreactors, will consumers consume cellular mahi-mahi and salmon, et cetera, et cetera. We think that the skepticism, as the technology improves and massive amounts of capital are flowing into the industry, accelerates, the skepticism quickly fades. And you're just witnessing the absolute spectacular rise of these companies beyond, impossible, just, Oatly. The fact that we saw a plant-based milk commercial in the middle of the Super Bowl this year, you guys are all in America. I miss all this stuff, but this was eye-popping for me. The industry is here to stay.
Very, very good answer. Thank you. What is the final number of target companies on the platform at this raise? About
This raise, 8.
8. Okay.
Yeah, both direct and co-investments. Of which 1, 2, 3 are already operable. The others are new investments. Doesn't mean we'll stop there, but this year we will most definitely stop there. We're talking to other partners, we're talking to other innovators, but they won't be for this year investments.
There's a question if you could comment on the growing trend toward functional ingredients as alternatives to the unhealthy aspects of some of the plant-based products you've described. Is this an area of focus for EFFV?
You know, it is. And I go back to the original question of plant-based burgers being unhealthy and chemicals to hold it together, and GMO soya, and is it coming from Canada, which is non-GMO, or Brazil where it's GMO, et cetera, et cetera. We have an asset called Pomegranate, which is a B2C plant-based brand that we're rolling out, targeting a pan-European rollout second quarter of this year. And our focus on that asset is healthy plant-based fare. And the more we can move away from processed food and stay with healthy plant-based fare, we think we're going to have a greater consumer acceptance to that end product, because the plant-based bacon, sausages, they are all very processed, and we understand this. We think the industry can go one step further and still create healthy plant-based fare without all the processing. And so at the moment, the industry has been built on meat replacements, right? The focus has been on meat replacements. My intuition tells me, Arthur, and this is to answer your client's question, your panel's question, is that as that younger generation sees the actual ingredients and input into the industry isn't going to stay stagnant here. It's going to evolve over time. And I think you're going to see a lot less processing. You're going to see a lot less shifting of raw materials from around the globe, and you're going to see a lot more local production for local consumption. The key is, can we do it at scale, right? Because we still need to feed the planet. I think the answer to that question is piano, right? One step at a time. We're at the beginning in the first inning of a 9-inning game, and the industry will come around. And my intuition tells me that you will start to see better ingredients, less chemicals, and non-GMO over time as the consumer demands it, because this is being driven by consumers at the end of the day. And the technology is improving as we speak.
Very interesting.
If I answered your question.
Yep, you got there for sure. This is just an editorial. I'll make it quick. The consumer, if it knew and had an awareness of how complex and devastating the fishing industry is to the ocean and the planet, if they had a choice of eating fish that was created a different way, and that's an easy choice to make, assuming
for the younger generation. Yes.
Yeah. And of course the restaurants and the chefs have to also
embrace,
care about that, right?
Yep.
And that catalyzes a lot of things.
We get this question a lot, Arthur. What is the ethical acceptance of the end consumer for cellular chicken or cellular fish? My response to that is, well, what's the ethical response today around our current cattle production and factory farming and trawlers and reefers in the oceans? This is clearly far more devastating. And so I think, along with the innovation and the technology and consumers, we need governments to step in and provide educational resources around the need for this tectonic shift. And that's how you go from 2% to Boston Consulting and Blue Horizon report of 22%. You need governments to step in and provide the educational resources and promotion of alternatives.
Totally makes sense. Here's a question about what level of active role you'll be taking in the companies that you invest in.
Okay, so we have only one asset that we own outright, own and operate. That's Pomegranate. That's the Dublin, Ireland asset I mentioned earlier, which is our plant-based B2C. Call it a sweet greens or a veggie grill without the brick and mortar. All of the other assets and partnerships that we've developed, we are a minority, and so we don't have board seat. We don't have a say in the direction of the business. However, we do provide, if necessary and needed, access to emerging markets, which is where we come from. Spent almost 20 years in Latin America, Southern Europe, where a brand or a product may be looking to expand internationally and needs an outlet or consulting or access to land, production, capital in the regions where we have an edge and a competitive advantage.
Great. Is there more on the deck, Brian?
Just a closing page. I think there's I've got a slide on, yep, the team. We're global. We're all over the place. I'm American. My co-founder is Brazilian. One of my partners sits in Athens, Greece. We're all over the globe. Our international advisors are global: Australia, Santiago, Chile, Amsterdam, and we all bring something different to the table with lots of gray hair and experience to execute. This is all about execution at this point.
Yeah, super interesting. Jerry, if you're out there, thanks for, this is much more interesting than I could have hoped. So really.
I think there's a last page, Arthur, just to kind of close out the topic of why all this matters. Our population is ballooning, and with that population ballooning, so is our carbon emissions in the atmosphere and our reduction of wilderness space. And this is straight from Sir David Attenborough's movie. It matters. It really matters. It matters that we channel capital to change the existing archaic food supply chain, probably one of the last industries on the planet to be disrupted.
Super interesting. For the record, just so everybody can hear it once again, just repeat your ask. And what, obviously there's the information here, but just to be clear so everybody knows that on the call, our friend attendees will be making sure that we put you in touch with Earth First Food Ventures, and so you can communicate directly with them. Be sure to do so if you're authentically interested. And then you might want to just quickly repeat the ask again, because there are some people hopping on and off.
Sure. Would you like me to do that now, Arthur?
Yeah, I think it's a good idea.
Yeah, so we're in Elliot, I don't know if you have the power to take me back to that page. Yeah, there you go. So we are issuing a private security offering of 10 million on a $30 million pre-money valuation, 40 million post, direct to cap table. So our investors become shareholders. I currently have 4 existing Greek ship owners in my cap table at the moment. And our focus is on channeling that capital towards innovative and disruptive food technologies for a healthier consumer, lower carbon footprint, and cleaner planet. Our shareholders are direct equity holders of our company and have the right to participate in any of our co-investments, of which we have 8 lined up for 2021.
Awesome. Great recap. So really, really appreciate having you on. We'll make sure that you're connected directly with the company, with the community who's participated on this call. Super interesting stuff. And I don't know if Jerry told you, but I have a very keen interest in my version of impact as a private investor. And so I am so glad to have dug a little deeper here with you today. And we can talk more about that offline too.
Thank you, Arthur. Really appreciate you're giving us the opportunity to tell our story. We think the timing is now, and the change is needed.
Yeah. I could not agree more. So lots of good comments and thank yous on the chat box. Just a reminder, this is being recorded. So if you have anybody that wants to look at it in your community that will benefit from it, please send them over to the Family Office Insights YouTube channel. And as always, thank you for spending the only thing that you can't make more of with us today and that's your time. Till next time. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Arthur. Take care.